In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a database for EDI files that follow the guideline of this 846-4010 SEF file. I will use the SEF Manager to generate the SQL scripts for creating the tables. So let me open this SEF file now with the SEF Manager. In my previous video, I showed how to create this SEF file from scratch. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend watching it first. I'll have the link to the video down in the description. So to generate the SQL script, you would need an SM plugin. Now because I have the enterprise license, all these plugins come included with it. If you have another license like the professional license, then these plugins are not included and you would have to purchase them. So let's select one and then select the transact SQL script. I'll uncheck the show comments, then hit OK. So here's the SQL script it created. But before I go through this, let me open up Visual Studio and start a new project. I'll call this project Tran 846 since we are going to translate an 846 EDI file. Okay, next I'm going to add a database in this project. And I'll call this database EDIdB. Okay, so here's the database that we just added. I'm going to double click on it and go to the Server Explorer and expand on tables. There are no tables in there right now, so I right click and select New Query. So here's the query editor. This is where we're going to copy and paste the SQL script from the SEF Manager and make the necessary modifications. Let me also open up the sample EDI file with the eFile Manager so that we can see its file structure to help us design the database. So in our sample EDI file, we have one interchange and one functional group under the interchange. In X12, you can actually have several functional groups in an interchange. So for example, we can have several of the GS and the GE between the ISA and the IEA segment. So if we were to design a normalized database, we would have one table for the interchange and one table for the functional group. And if we look at the script created by the SEF Manager, we see that that is what it has done. It has created a script to create a table for the interchange and another script to create the table for the functional group. So let me copy these scripts over to the Visual Studio editor so that we can make modifications to them. I can use the scripts the way they are right now to create the two tables, but I'm actually going to modify it so that the table names and the field names will be simplified, and maybe I'm going to delete some of the fields that I don't need. Basically redesign this so that it will be more specific to my needs. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to delete the segment position number that was included in the field names. Okay, that's better. So now we have the segment ID, the element position number, and a description for the field name. Let me bring up the eFile Manager so that we can compare what we have now to the EDI file structure. So here we have a one-to-one relationship between the EDI file structure and the table structure. We have 16 data elements here and 16 fields here, and this last two is for the interchange trailer, and we have the two data elements here. Now if you look at our sample EDI file, you see that some data elements are missing some data. That means they're not being used. And there's some data elements with data that I do not want to save in our database. So I'm going to change or modify the table to delete those fields associated to those data elements because they're unnecessary. Okay, so I won't be needing these. I'm going to delete it. And I won't be needing these last two. I'm going to delete that. I'm also going to consolidate both these tables into one table because the trading partners have agreed that there will only be one functional group in one interchange. So let me bring up the eFile Manager again to see what we have in the functional group. Okay, so this information in the functional group is not in the interchange, so we're going to save that. The application sender code and the application receiver code is the same as the interchange sender ID and the interchange receiver ID, so we won't save that. The date and the time is the same as the interchange date and time, so we won't save these. And we're going to save the group control number because it's not in the interchange information. We don't have to save this, and we're going to save the version of the group. So data element 1, 6, and 8 are what we're going to save. So I'm going to copy these, 1, and move it up here, 6, and 8. And the rest we can delete. Now I just have to change the name of the table to envelope inbound, because this table is for saving the envelope of EDI files we are receiving. I'm going to remove this underscore. There, that's better. And I'm also going to change the primary key. So instead of the primary key being made up of these four fields, I'm just going to have one that's automatically generated by the system. And I'll call it envelope key. I'll change this constraint name to the table name plus index, and the primary key now is this, envelope key. There, I think we're done. Let me save this. And I'll call this create tables and then envelope. Okay, so if I execute this script, there we have it. We have the first table created, called envelope inbound. So let's create the next table. I'm going to bring up the eFile Manager. So remember when we created the SEF file, I had mentioned that the message starting from ST and ending with SE, the segments are sectioned into header, detail, and summary. So that's how we're going to design our table. So by looking at the area of the segment, we'll know what section they're in. So ST is in area 1, BIA is in area 1, DTM is in area 1, N1 is in area 1, and the outline and segment is in area 2. So let's create a header table for the ST segment and BIA, DTM, and the N1 segment. Okay, so let me bring up the SEF Manager and look for the script that creates those fields for those data segments. So here's the ST, the BIA, the DTM, and the N1. So I have to copy this add a new query and paste it here. So this script creates two tables, and so I'm going to consolidate these two tables into one table. I'm going to call it IN for inbound 846 header. Create tables 846 and save. So just like the first table, I'm going to rename the fields by removing the position number from the field name. Next, I'm going to move these fields to the top table. So we don't need this table anymore. So I'm going to delete it. So I'm going to bring up the eFile Manager again to see what else in this table we can modify. So in the ST segment, these values I'm going to save, so nothing to change here. And in the BIA segment, these values I'm going to save too, so nothing to change here. The DTM segment, You see this qualifier here, it says 166 message. This means that this date is a message date. So what I can do is I can delete that and change the description to message date. So now I don't have to save this qualifier, I just have to save this, and I know it's a message date. There's no time, but there's a time code here, GN. So I'm just going to keep that as well. And then in one segment, this is not clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the implementation guideline. And in this N1 segment, it says that this data element is the warehouse name, and this is the warehouse ID. Okay, so I don't need to save the qualifiers, and I just need to change this to warehouse name and warehouse ID. Save that. And we don't need this. So delete that. Save. Okay, just like the first table, I'm going to change the primary key. I'm going to change these two fields to one that's automatically generated by the system. I'll call it header key. That to this. And I'm going to copy this header name. Okay, so that's the primary key, and I have to change the foreign key, and the foreign key ties to the envelope. So this primary key in the envelope table will be the foreign key in this table. This. There, that should do it. Next, I'm going to create the detail table. So let me bring up the EDI Manager. So the detail table will be for these segments: LIN, Area 2, SDQ, Area 2. So even looking at the EDI Manager, you can see that for one of these segments here that we just created for the header table, there's many of the LIN and the SDQ segments. So there's a one-to-many relationship. So clearly these segments belong in the detail table. So let's go ahead and create it. Let's bring up the SEF Manager. And here's the script for the LIN and the SDQ segment. So this is all we need. I'm going to copy this. And I'm just going to paste it here. I'm going to change the name. Call this detail. I'm going to remove the position number from the field name. Oh, you know what? Let me go back here and fix this up. Remove the position number from this field name. Okay. Let me bring up the eFile Manager. Expand the LIN segment. So this data element I'm going to save. Now I'm going to bring up the SEF Manager just to see how many qualifiers we have here. Okay, so this guideline has two qualifiers. DP for discontinued part number, SK for stock keeping unit. I can actually have two fields, each having a name of the qualifier description. So instead of saving this qualifier, I'm just going to save this to the appropriate field. Okay, so to do that in the script, let me minimize this. I'm going to delete this because I don't need that. And I'm going to copy this and one I'll call discontinued part number. The next one will be stock keeping unit. I'll just say SKU. Now if anyone's going to query this table, that person is going to find it easier to understand the description of these fields than the codes of the qualifier, DP or SK. Okay, so let's move on to the next segment. In our sample EDI file, we don't have a DTM segment, but in our implementation guideline, there is a DTM segment. And this date segment is for the available date. So in our SQL script, we can remove this datetime qualifier, and in our field name, type in available. That's the available date. And the time should be available time as well. And we can just leave the time code as is. Okay, so let's work on the SDQ segment. Let me bring up the eFile Manager. Okay, the first data element is the unit measurement code. I'm going to save that, but I'm just going to rename this unit code. And this qualifier, I don't think I want to save it. I just want to double check. For SDQ data element 2, the code, yes, it will always be 92. So I'm not going to save that. And this one is just the warehouse ID code. So I'm going to change. So I'm going to delete this first and change this to warehouse ID code. And this is the quantity in the warehouse. And that's the quantity. So I'll just keep that as is. I'm going to delete these fields because I'm going to add my own primary key and foreign key. So for the primary key, I'll call detail, and the foreign key is the header key. So the foreign key is the primary key here. So these two tables are tied together by the header key. Now I just want to add a constraint for the primary key for this table. And the constraint for the foreign key there. I think we're done with this table. Okay, so moving on. I think we just have one more segment to do, which is the CTT segment in Area 3. Now, there is really no need to create another table for this segment. Since this is a one-to-many relationship with a detail table, I can actually put this CTT segment in our header table. So let's go to the SEF Manager SQL script. Here's the CTT field. I copy that. And I'm going to paste it here. Delete the position number. Let's see the data elements here. Number of line items, 8. And hash total, is here. So now I think we're done. So here are the two tables that we've created for the 846. Let me go ahead and execute this script. Completed successfully. Go over here, refresh this, and here are the two tables that we just created. And that's how you go about creating a SQL database for storing data from an EDI file with the help of the SEF Manager. Thank you for watching. If you want more details about our software, please visit us at EDIdEv.com.